If you had any doubt that Hogwarts Legacy was gonna be a good game, safe to say Hogwarts Legacy is a damn very good game and a definite Game of the Year contender. It took me roughly about 30 hours to see the credits roll on this one, and it's safe to say that if you are a Harry Potter fan, you will be absolutely in love with this game and probably make the statement that this is Game of the Year and no one should tell you otherwise. If you're not a Harry Potter fan, if you're someone like me who merely watched the films leading up to this game's release just so that you can have some sort of background information on this IP, this game is amazing. I am not a Harry Potter fan. I did watch the movies leading up to this game's release, and this game blew me away. It was a fantastic experience. So for me, this was great. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you're in love. This is a dream come true. Upon firing up the game, if you go through the options menu, you'll find that on PlayStation 5, they have multiple graphics modes, ranging from both standard fidelity modes to performance to high refresh rate. The one thing that I think people need to realize is in the initial setup, there is no option to turn ray tracing on. It's actually in a separate menu that you have to go into after your initial startup. Then you can choose to activate ray tracing. In terms of the quality, I mean, in my experience, I noticed that there was a huge visual leap between graphics and performance. The ray tracing does make a significant difference. The details in the clothing is noticeably better. The faces are better. But of course, this comes at the expense that you're playing the game at 30 frames per second instead of 60. For me personally, I eventually made the swap to 60 frames per second, but I don't think anyone should fault any player for playing it at 30 with the ray tracing turned on because this is a visual gem. Obviously, once you get your story started, you will then have to create your character. Now, the options for creating your character are actually pretty damn good. It's not nothing too in detail. It's not like cyberpunk level of customization, but it's definitely really good, and there's a lot of depth there so that everybody can have their own witch or wizard. And obviously, this being a Harry Potter game, once you get through the opening section, which is a tutorial essentially, you'll then be visiting Hogwarts, the school of Hogwarts. You'll go through your selection process of which house, and of course, you then carry on your adventure. Going into the game itself, the one thing I'll say is that Hogwarts Legacy has a lot to do. There is a lot of activities outside of the main story, both during your quest and after you finish your quest. There is a lot to do in terms of flying your broom, leveling it up. There's races that you can be done. There's puzzles to unlock chests, customizing your required room to your liking. You can even have a little area for animals where you can nurture animals that will yield you materials to upgrade your gear. I mean, there is literally a lot to do in this game. And one of the other things that I liked about this game when it comes to your gear and your loadouts was the fact that they had a very, very flexible transmog system. Essentially, any piece of gear that you've owned that you then sold later on, you still have access to it through the transmog if you wanted to retain the look of it while it not filling up your inventory. Of course, that was one of the bigger issues with this game in my playthrough, was that your inventory is quite limited in terms of how much you can store. So in my experience, it came down to me constantly having to go to a vendor, sell off all my stuff that I wasn't using before I started every main quest so that I would at least get the value of gold for those items. Obviously, when you're not doing classes and watching cutscenes, you need great combat. And Hogwarts Legacy delivers on great combat. At first, you will feel that the combat is relatively basic. Obviously, you're limited in your spells in the beginning. But as you progress through the game and you get more and more spells, the combat really starts to shine. Of course, there's like a rock, paper, scissors element when enemies put up their shields and you have to match the spell type with it. But overall, the spell casting, the action in the game, the combat was a highlight for me. I never shied away from combat in this game. It was so much fun. They did a real good job with the combat and the mechanics there. And obviously this is also a reflection when it comes to the DualSense controller. The DualSense controller in my opinion, again, it falls on that line of being a gimmick, because while I enjoyed the feedback that I received on the DualSense controller, it's also not the best usage of it. I personally think that in this game's case, I enjoyed it, but it felt more on the gimmick side. So don't expect any revolutionary DualSense features with regards to the PlayStation 5 version of the game. As for the RPG side of this game, it's actually not that complicated. There's only really like 3 stats for you to fiddle with. Health, which you automatically gain more health as you level up, and then you're just overall attack and defense. It's not like a Souls game or The Witcher where there's 7 or 8 stats categories that you have to be mindful of. It's not that deep in terms of RPG side, and it kind of makes sense because, you know, Harry Potter is catered towards a younger audience, so you don't want to overly complicate the mechanics and the systems on the RPG side of things. So for an RPG enthusiast, you might be a little disappointed as it is a little light, but for casual players or people who like more simplified RPG mechanics, kind of like God of War, you'll be in line with this one and you'll have no issues. I didn't have any issues with it personally. I do like RPGs, but for some, they might find the systems to be a little on the bare side. So for the most part, I love this game. I thought it was great. The way you learn spells, the way it teaches you the ins and outs, the way you attend class, you meet classmates, the way you solve puzzles. There's a lot to do in this game, but this game is far from perfect. The 2 main issues I had with Hogwarts Legacy in my playthrough, the first one was level gating. And this is something that it's a big no-no for me in any game. Not that I was beelining the story. I would do any side quest that rewarded me with a spell, and I would do any side quest that had an interesting story behind it. And yet, despite me doing side quests, I still got level gated a couple times where I was forced to explore, forced to do more side quests just to level up my character so I could do the next main story mission. This to me is a big no-no in games. It's like you're artificially making your game longer, and even though these side quests and exploration is supposed to be optional, you're actually not making it optional because you're forcing people to grind to a certain level if they're beelining the story. Again, I didn't beeline it, but I still got gated. So I imagine if there are folks who just beeline this game's story, you're going to get level gated multiple times over, and that gets very frustrating. And to me, I hate that stuff in games. And if I want to beeline a story, I should be able to beeline the story and save the side content for later if that's what should I choose to do. The other issue I had, and this is usually common with open world games, is bugs and glitches. I mean, I experienced probably 1 crash in my 25 to 30 hour playthrough, but I did experience some funny bugs. One bug was I was supposed to repair a bridge, but the animation didn't display. Another one, I had an NPC sliding back and forth during a cutscene, which was weird. And of course, I had the other one where I just did an NPC interaction, and for some reason the NPC got the idea to run around in circles. Nothing game breaking, but they were noticeable. On top of a few little visual bugs that I had, I even had one issue where I would go through a door and I would get like a buffering screen as the game was loading the interior section. So there are little quirks about it that affected my playthrough, but nothing too damaging, nothing that made me feel like, oh my god, this is bad. Like, not even close. Overall, Hogwarts Legacy is a fantastic RPG for even the most non-Harry Potter fan. If you are a Harry Potter fan, I equate this to anyone who's a fan of any IP. You are going to be in love with this game. Just, there's so much to do, so much references to Harry Potter. By the time you roll the credits on this one, you will literally feel like you just played a Harry Potter movie or a Harry Potter book, just with a whole new characters and cast. But aside from this, this is a game that should not be missed. It will definitely be in Game of the Year conversations. I'm personally giving this game a 9 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.